10 wins plus a major bowl appearance for the first time in forever for Mississippi State, but it's back to the recruiting trail. You can never rest in the SEC. There's another season coming up here very shortly in 2015, and more work to be done for Dan Mullen and company. We bring in Justin Sutton, for whom the cowbell tolls on the Mississippi State platform for SB Nation. Hey, Justin, we appreciate the time as always. Would love to hear about those big commits that seem to be firmly entrenched. You don't want to see any surprises, but those guys that seem to be really firm commits at this point that you really are liking at this point.
Yeah, Mark, glad to be with you. As always, we get to the silly season of recruiting, but you talk about big-time names that are firmly entrenched. A couple of them from Mississippi State are already in the fold. The Bulldogs with about 28 folks right now in this class, 6 who are already enrolled at Mississippi State, so they're good to go. They're set. The one that maybe has me more excited than anybody else is Donald Gray. 2 years ago, he was a commit to the Bulldogs. A couple of reasons, couldn't go ahead and come into Mississippi State. They got him to go to Copiah Lincoln, for those who aren't familiar with the Mississippi JUCO system over in Weston, Mississippi. And he has just continued to develop into a fantastic wide receiver. I'm excited about this guy already being on campus and what he's going to do next year, because you look at the Mississippi State receiving corps with a guy like Darunya Wilson, with a guy like Fred Ross, and you bring in some more elite talent, a guy who's a 4-star receiver who can produce right away on the field. The Bulldogs can go 4 and 5 wide with people and outmatch anybody in a lot of ways next year. Also, a guy who's already in, speaking of firmly entrenched, he's in the trenches, Martinez Rankin, a 4-star offensive lineman from Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. And if you follow JUCO football, you know they're always one of the powerhouses in the state of Mississippi. Another fantastic player if you're a Bulldog fan to already have in the fold for Mississippi State. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of exciting players still to come in on signing day. Probably one of those everybody looks at the most, Jamal Peters, the safety out of Bassfield, 6'1", 206. A lot of people talk about him maybe becoming a linebacker. I'm not 100% sold on that. If he can keep the speed to play in the SEC in the secondary, the Bulldogs needs the help at that position. 6'1", 206, not much different in size than what Jonathan Banks was as a freshman playing safety for Mississippi State.
Justin, I know you like this class, but are there any guys running around out there that have Mississippi State on the list who may be leaning elsewhere, but if Dan Mullen can work his magic in the 24th hour, that you would love to see change their minds and come to Mississippi State that are reasonable hopefuls? Yeah,
one guy I think that everybody's going to be watching for is Leo Lewis. I think that's the big name that's out there for the Bulldogs, a 5-star linebacker out of Brookhaven, Mississippi. Money says probably Ole Miss, maybe LSU, and then maybe Mississippi State. But he's taken his visits to all 3 schools. He hasn't shied away from any of them. And maybe a guy who's taken visits to confirm the way he feels about his original choice, or maybe a guy who isn't 100% sold yet. We'll find out on Wednesday. But the Bulldogs can find a way to add Leo Lewis to this class. Mississippi State fans are going to be amazingly happy. And you talk about magic for the Bulldogs, the TD Moton kid from Louisiana a year ago about this time, decommitted from Mississippi State, committed to Alabama. Things didn't quite work out between him and the Crimson Tide, and all of a sudden he's back in the fold with Mississippi State here late in the game.
Yeah, Moton ranked the 24th rated defensive tackle according to ESPN, number 228 on their big board of 300. So Dak Prescott coming back next season. You lose some on defense. If you look at the needs of this team and where some freshmen could possibly get some playing time right out of the gate, where would those spots be?
Dan Mullen, I don't think he's afraid to play freshmen anywhere if they turn out to be the best. But for this incoming class, I think you have to be honest and say there's a lot of talent right now in Starkville already. I would say if somebody can come in the secondary and really prove themselves early in camp, they'll have a chance if they're not starting but seeing significant playing time. I think that's an area to watch for Mississippi State. I think you might want to watch, maybe not guys who are going to be playing starting at linebacker. I don't see anybody starting on the defensive line who's new. Martinez Rankin, who isn't a freshman but a new player, I imagine he'll end up playing plenty of time on the offensive line for Mississippi State. But Dan Mullen's also used special teams a lot to get some of these guys into the games and getting them going. The running back position as well could be a place where some guys get some action. He played Ashton Shumpert a couple of years ago. as a true freshman at the running back position. So maybe some of these guys coming in who are running backs get some playing time, even though that position is still pretty deep, even with Josh Robinson leaving going to the NFL draft.
Hey, Justin, we haven't talked since our preview of the Orange Bowl. How hard did Bulldog Nation take the Orange Bowl game? You yourself, it's difficult when you talk about bowl games and the seriousness of it, but it being the first major game for Mississippi State in forever, how hard did you take it?
Well, I thought my worst accident or the worst moment of my trip to the Orange Bowl was going to be the car wreck I was in on I-95, and I managed to get rear-ended while moving on the interstate. Somebody got me. And it turned out the train wreck that was worse was the football game. It was disheartening, and I think the reason it was disheartening was the Bulldogs did not close the season well. You had such a fantastic start, but then down the stretch you lose to Alabama, you lose to Ole Miss, you lose to Georgia Tech, lose 3 of your 4 to close out the season. That hurts. That didn't leave anybody feeling great. And the fact that Mississippi State just couldn't quite seem to get into it. The Hail Mary touchdown to end the first half, you sit there and you're thinking, we're going to win this thing. I was sitting next to a couple of college kids in the stands, and this one girl just absolutely abused my shoulder, just hitting out. No, I don't know who this girl is. Just beat the fire on my shoulder when the Hail Mary was caught. And I was like, I need you to calm down, You just felt momentum coming that way, and then Georgia Tech just kept scoring and scoring and scoring in the second half. And it was deflating. But I'll be honest with you, Mark, and this may not make the Mississippi State fans happy. The faithful may get a little mad about this. Really disappointed. A lot of Mississippi State fans fouled right on out in the third quarter. And I was like, we haven't been in this game since 1941, and you're leaving. My brand new kid who just turned 5 knew not to leave. He didn't want to leave before the game was over. He was sticking it out. I was sad to see a lot of Mississippi State fans leave, but I think the reason you saw a lot of them leave, they were disheartened. It was a tough way to close out the season, and that's kind of the only bad thing about this recruiting class is there's probably not going to be a lot of brand new, exciting news with this class. It's going to be old news, and I think people may be feeling a little disappointed and down on it when they really shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, number one, it's the Orange Bowl. Number two, you traveled, 800 miles and spent all sorts of money to get down there and hotel stay and the whole deal, and you don't stay for the whole game? I really don't understand that myself.
I don't either. I can't figure it out. I mean, great weather. How many times do you get to go watch a football game in shorts and sandals on New Year's Eve? It was fantastic.
And I was really surprised. You mentioned the team kind of running out of gas down the stretch of the regular season, and I didn't completely buy into that. But now that they finished out the stretch and lost another game in the Orange Bowl, I guess that had some credit to it. I thought, though, having the 3 to 4 weeks to re-energize would be good for this football team, and that they would come out completely fresh and ready to go. But they got outplayed.
Yeah, and you can't discount too. They did lose their defensive coordinator Jeff Collins in between the Ole Miss game and the Orange Bowl, and lots of pressure on Deshae Townsend. He was the cornerbacks coach for Mississippi State, and he got stuck with defensive play calling. He never done that before in his career. Going up against a tough defense, and maybe not all the guys on board to help prep the team quite the way they need to be prepped. But let's be honest, Georgia Tech was a very good football team in the 2014 season. Just a couple of games, they couldn't get the defense to click, and they lost. The Bulldogs, they lost 3 games. They kind of ran out of steam a little bit towards the end of the year, but they lost to 3 really good football teams. So it's not like they went out and lost to Youngstown State and UNLV and somebody else. I mean, they lost to good teams down the stretch, and I think you got to keep that in perspective as well.
Yeah, you're right. That wasn't typical 8-5, 7-6 Georgia Tech. They had just manhandled Georgia, Clemson. Mm-hmm. They beat Georgia. They barely lost to Florida State, who of course was defending national champion. Really good football teams down there in Miami. All right. Good, solid recruiting class. You look to be in good shape in the top 20, which barely gets you into the top 10 in the SEC, but That's life in the SEC. All right, Justin. It's Justin Sutton of For Whom the Cowbell Tolls here on Mark Rogers TV. We always appreciate the time, Justin.
Hey, Mark, anytime, bud. Glad to catch up with you.